and welcome back to the Strange Water podcast. Thank you for joining us for today's conversation. In this industry, so often we jump straight to the technology and the rapidly shifting ecosystem that we often skip past the behind-the-scenes dynamic that underpins all industries, the careers of the folks that will their ideas into reality. Crypto is particularly interesting because we're not hooked into the traditional system that pushed people into their life's calling. There's no trade school or recruiting system to break into being a builder. In these early days, each one of us needs to find our own way to the blockchain, and then each one of us needs to figure out how to build a career centered around it. Today, we will be speaking with Nick Westlake about his path to where he is today at Off-Chain Labs. In this episode, you'll learn a lot about what it means to work your way from a random Discord participant into one of the best and most well-known connectors in DeFi. Nick's story, although still very much in its opening chapters, is a reminder to all of us about what it takes to be successful. Passion in what you're building, the ability to think big based on real-world experience, and above all, a fun, friendly, and generous attitude. Before we begin, please do not take financial advice from this or any other podcast. Ethereum and decentralized finance will change the world one day, but you can easily lose all of your money in the process. All right, let's get started. Nick, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Hey, my pleasure, Rex. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome, man. So before we kind of get into it, can you just give myself and the audience a little bit about your background and maybe not how you got to where you are today, but how you got to crypto?
It's a great question, right? It's a unique question that almost everybody has almost a very different answer to because this is such a young, I guess,
the most
industry.
Boring question with the most interesting answers.
Exactly, right? I've heard the most wild things of all time, but mine's not wild in the least. Very straightforward. Mid 2010s, I was in college, trying to surfing the internet, etc. And I mean, to be the most frank as possible, right? Like we were trying to order some stuff off the internet that you just couldn't order with a credit card or a bank account, quite frankly, right? And that led us. That led
government treasury bonds, right?
Or government treasury bonds, correct? So that led me and my acquaintances, if you will, to find alternative methods of payment. And it ultimately led to a peer-to-peer Bitcoin network of trading and whatever you want to call it. And that was my first little introduction, right? And I didn't really understand, being a stupid, dumb college kid, I guess you could say, just didn't really understand what the potential was for a lot of this stuff, right? Like Ethereum had just come out, not really knowing what a smart contract was, or the programmable money aspect of it, if you will, right? It was just like, oh, Bitcoin, it's internet money, and you could just transact with things on the internet, right? I don't know. Fast forward, out of college, I worked a very mundane, boring gig, telecommunications. I was selling fiber connectivity, failover solutions for mid-sized firms, whatever, business firms, etc. And then I got into an on-chain Tron project, to be honest. So Tron. Tron.
Holy shit! You are actually the first person I've ever heard that organically used Tron.
Not by choice. Yeah. Not to knock on Tron. It's got its use cases, but yeah, I worked for a little project there for a while. That was kind of my in. And then it just kind of sprouted right from there to where I'm at today.
So, yeah, and again, your journey from, putting your toe in the water in Tron to, off-chain and we're still all at the beginning of our careers. We're at the beginning of this industry. But
exactly,
anyway,
right.
that's a story we need to get into. But I guess while you are in college partaking in e-commerce, what were you studying? And you, I guess it's interesting to me that you interacted with this technology for a real use case and didn't see the vision and then came back to it later. What were you studying? What were you thinking about at the time?
That's a great question. College, man. I went into college not knowing what I was going to do. Can I curse? I won't curse.
No.
I came into college not knowing what I was going to do. I went for just a business degree. I literally graduated with a business admin degree. What do you do with that? I guess you go do random business things, right? And then after college, again, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And it was that whole 2018 run where I went, oh, okay, I think no, this can actually go somewhere. I always had an interest in financial markets and things of that nature, but wasn't like privy to investment banking or financial advisory, whatever you want to call it, right? And this was kind of like the end for me, I guess you could say. And then as I got smarter and more mature, quite frankly, I was like, okay, there's actually some utility to this and different types of use cases and things of that nature. So, and that's when I started going online and venturing off into various different Discord chats and Telegram chats and kind of just not educating myself per se, but I guess you can call it that, but like immersing myself into the culture, quite frankly, right? And that kind of pickled my interest to a certain extent, where I decided I was like, okay, digital assets and cryptocurrency are I'm most interested in. I haven't been interested in something like this basically my entire life, besides like, I don't know, video games when I was 13 years old, right? And I just gravitated towards it, man, and it almost came natural. It felt natural to me in that sense, and it's been basically game over since then. If I haven't looked back.
Yeah, yeah, and I can tell from your beard you are either a lumberjack and have never touched a video game, or like you care deeply about them. And I think that all of us who have like grown up gaming, this technology is like so much easier, and it's part of the story of Ethereum, right? It's like 13-year-old or whatever Vitalik like getting mad that they took away his spell in World of Warcraft, and you know I vividly remember when I was in college, my dad was friends with the dad of the guy who started Riot Games, which is like League of Legends. And so we went there, went to go visit, and I'll never forget as we were walking out of Riot Games, who was already like $100 million company, and like weeks later would be a multi-billion-dollar company. He looks to me and he goes, "Can you believe that they built a business selling things that aren't real?"
Real, tangible, right? People have
Yeah,
a hard
and
time.
in my head, I was like, I mean, yeah, like what do you? But I do think that there's just something about like the way we grew up and what we were exposed
100%.
to.
What one great example of this, honestly, is I was a big RuneScape guy,
Yeah,
and the Grand Exchange was like this peer-to-peer marketplace that you could go and sell your in-game items to, right? And it was kind of like that forefront, if you will, of the new frontier kind of that we live now, this peer-to-peer network that you can talk on, transact on, whatever you may be, but really those online marketplaces, if you will, really blossomed. If my I think a lot of people's interest in the types of these things, because I can't tell you how many times, or even coworkers that I have, and they're like, "Hey, did you ever play RuneScape?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course." And they're like, "Dude, the Grand Exchange is kind of what piqued my interest in this crypto stuff." I'm like, "Oh man, that's like it's a recurring theme there, almost."
no, for sure. I was just actually having a conversation last night with someone who's really deep in the Web3 gaming space, and like where we kind of settled is like, okay, yes, there's things like Ronin or sorry, like a Axie, and which is essentially just like, okay, you have your inventory, but we're gonna put it on chain and call it a crypto game, and like, okay, right. And then there's like some people that are doing somewhat interesting stuff by like doing things with smart contracts, where the smart contracts compete, and like, okay, like whatever. But I mean, like for us people, I'm not even gonna call myself a gamer, but one who partakes in games, it's like just so obvious that we have real economies in games right now. Like whether it's World of Warcraft or whether it's like Eve Online or EverQuest or whatever, people pay real money for those things. And like, my gigabrain thesis on where Web3 gaming comes from is someone just builds the first bridge from a centralized game to the blockchain.
That's a very interesting idea. And just a small comment on that. I'm not sure if you're privy, but Eve Online just raised like I think it was $40 million. I'm unsure who led the round, but it was for their Web3 gaming initiative. So yeah, 40 M's, and the Eve Online is going to come on chain, hopefully sooner versus later. But that's like a huge step, right? That's a AAA game that's been around for what 15 plus years at this point. Don't quote me on that; it might be less, but I know it's been around for a while. But that's like a first instance of a large AAA gaming studio or game coming, kind of making that first leap. So it's great to see.
Yeah, and we'll stop the gaming conversation here. This is not. I'm not even. We're not gaming people. This is not a gaming podcast. But for, for anyone who that didn't follow and you don't know what Eve Online is, like that is worth knowing your history, and like that will show you what like internet economies can be, and like if you understand what has happened in Eve Online, that Ethereum is just like such a no-brainer. It's almost like I can't even believe we're this far behind compared to where we've already been.
I would
So,
wholeheartedly agree.
yeah. definitely encourage doing more research on that. But let's get back to Nick. So where I met you was actually a couple months ago this year, or sorry, a couple months ago last year, and it was in the Umami Discord. And I think there's a lot of things to say about Umami, especially like over the year. But what where I want to start this part of the conversation is like, can you talk to me a little bit about broad strokes how you get from this Tron project to finding yourself like not only in like core Ethereum but in the bleeding edge of like these scaling solutions? And at the time, like Umami was just a treasury. And like what brought you here? And I guess like the point of this question is to talk about like what is the journey from like participating in a project to like really becoming like a career crypto person that's contributing to crypto projects?
That's a great question, and where do I even start? So the Tron project was first, right, and that kind of gave me my foothold, if you will, on kind of the culture, how um, blockchain companies operate, how they function, things of that nature, right? And then once I got that like experience, I worked there for about 8 9 months, but then I made a jump to a centralized exchange, but it's geared towards more enterprise institutional investors, called SFOX, and it's a shop out of San Francisco. Um, and I actually worked there for the last 2 years before I made the jump here. But while I was doing so, right, like you work at a centralized exchange, you get privy to the coins that are coming out, the type of different networks, things of that nature, right? And so I never really left the ecosystem, if you will, from Tron to where I'm at today. And while I was working there, I've always been not a maxi per se, but I understand the Ethereum and how the back end technology works versus some other EVM compatible chains, et cetera, right? And it kind of just resonated with me because it's a very decentralized network in the sense that there's validators all over the world, and there's not one single entity kind of operating the chain in itself, right? And just kind of when that whole, I guess, rise in 2020, right after the pandemic started happening, right? We started kind of seeing this really large influx of on-chain activity. I was just like, oh, okay, well, this is going to be something at that point, right? Like it was just after DeFi summer. You had all these projects like Yearn who were just like literally just a couple of months old, but I saw the potential of that, right? And then operating on that chain, eating shit coins, if you will, meme coins. You had some nice blue chip coins as well in your portfolio, but along came summer of 2021, and well, I guess let me preface, like, always the cool thing about crypto is that, like, if I want to go talk to the founders of Coca-Cola, like I can't, or they're dead, but like I can't go do that, right? Like I can't hop in a Discord chat and at somebody that has founded a multi-million dollar or mid 9-figure protocol, whatever you want to call it. And that was another thing that kind of drew me in. But always, throughout that whole year while I was operating on Ethereum mainnet, was just immersing myself in various different kinds of tokens, various different types of communities, things of that nature, just getting like the overall vibe, if you will, and things like that. And then, August of 2021 came along, and Arbitrum launched, like the Arbitrum launched its mainnet. And I was like, okay, well, this is cool. I wasn't very privy to what an L2 was at that point, really, right? Like on a very high level I was, but not immersed like I am today. But so I did my first bridge over there, right? And
Sorry, for those of us that weren't around during that time, can you talk about like what was going on in the early days of Arbitrum? Like why were you bridging your money over?
yeah, that's a great question, man. And so let me start. So I was bridging my money over because I was curious, quite frankly, right? Number one, I was very curious. Like, what is this? They said it's a layer 2 scaling solution to Ethereum, right? It rolls up to Ethereum, so it inherently has the same type of security, etc. So I was like, okay, well, number one, I kind of feel safe to bridge my cash over here. And number two, again, I'm very curious, right? And in the early days of Arbitrum, it was the Wild West. People say, permissionless networks are kind of the Wild West, right? Because you don't need somebody's permission to go and launch something on there. But it really was, right? Like you had the Nyencat, which was the first farm there that rugged. I was a victim of that, if you will. But and then just like these meme projects that kind of come when a new chain launches. Obviously, you had scams, grifters, etc. But What's really cool is
Like,
that
isn't a piece of that history that it was like only extremely recently that the like daily usage on Arbitrum surpassed that like original like exuberance and like rugginess of the original.
the TVL, correct, right? So the TVL skyrocketed, it dipped a little bit, right? You had that grace period, if you will, and now we're back up to all time highs at this point, right? In terms of TVL, but really the early days were just I mean, unlike on every chain, you had the grifters, of course, but then the cool thing about Arbitrum is that the technology is sound. It is an optimistic roll up with working fraud proofs, right? And I think that attracted a lot of smart folks, a lot of smart engineers, a lot of smart builders, right? And then you had kind of the OG protocols, if you will, start kind of coming, like GMX, like DopeX, like the Jones DAO, right? Like Treasure DAO, right? The gaming studio, who's seen enormous success at this point. And I think that's a true testament, really, on the type of roll up that Arbitrum is. And I mean, from that, right? It just has just blossomed into this very vibrant ecosystem that has protocols in every vertical: gaming, NFTs, DeFi, social fi. You see some, um, everything in between, NFT fi, right? Like that didn't exist in kind of in 2021, where I can go take a loan out against my NFT if I wanted to, right? So, and not to mention, right? It's very cheap to transact on Arbitrum. It's very fast, unlike Ethereum mainnet, etc. So I also think that the UX of it, as a whole, if you will, is much smoother than operating or transacting on Ethereum mainnet.
Yeah, I mean, like objectively speaking, right? And whether that's on like on the timing or the cost and everything. And a quick plug for myself: every morning, myself and a couple of the like DeFi media crew do this daily news show called Leviathan News. Check us out. But this morning, we are actually having a discussion on it's just like really interesting when you compare Arbitrum and Optimism in terms of like just like I don't even want to say like TVL, but like true activity and like the English meaning of that word. Like today, like Arbitrum is this like vibrant thing where, to your point, all of these like varied applications, whether it's like literal degen gambling on GMX or like trying to push the boundaries of gamings with Magic or, like we just deployed a Gnosis safe, like I did it on Arbitrum. And then you look at what's going on Optimism and it's like, okay, that is basically a chain that supports a single dex. And so, I had some comments on why I think we got there, but I guess to skip ahead to the part where we're talking about Arbitrum, do you have any thoughts on how Arbitrum has been so successful in building like a real ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question too. One that that actually founders ask me quite frequently, to be honest. And the answer is really simple, right? Arbitrum launched August of 2021. Well, it wasn't there. There was no token, right? So there was no monetary incentive, if you will, to come and build here, right? So number one, the technology had to speak for itself, right? And then on like the back end, if you will, the way that Off Chain Labs has, and not anymore, right? Because now the decentralized DAO Foundation now operate Arbitrum and Nova, but in the
Well,
past
we'll talk about that in a moment.
it was off it was Off Chain Labs, right? And the way we just treat and still do to this day, treat our protocols with, obviously the utmost respect, and then also provide them with the necessary resources that they need. Not necessarily monetary resources, but resources such as marketing support, tech support, like technical support, business development support, service provider support, things of that nature, right? And just being very hands-on, if you will, with these protocols. Number one, just rapport that you develop with these types of folks by doing stuff like that really goes a long way, and I think it shows, right? Because we're very Arbitrum is the talk of the town, if you will, right now. But again, it really was just how the resources that we provided to the protocols itself, and again, that's a real testament to I think a lot of our success here. Specifically with GMX and some of the other larger protocols as well.
Yeah, I mean, from like the outsider's perspective, it's just like, okay, well, why would I bridge? Why would I have my capital on Arbitrum versus Optimism versus on mainnet? It's like, okay, well, there's interesting stuff to do on Arbitrum. It's like, okay, well, why is there interesting stuff to do on Arbitrum? It's like, well, because devs chose to build there. And like when you just like look at this from the outside, it's just like very like I don't know, it just like it is what it is and it's organic and like we go where the things are. But I think like what you're saying is absolutely right. Like that is not an accident. That is like a result of like real ground game being run. And like what ground game means in this context is like being able to like facilitate developers and make them want to work with you.
Exactly. That's exactly right, man. And that's the sentiment that we kind of get throughout the throughout the ecosystem when new folks approach us. That's the sentiment that they've heard, and that's what kind of attracts them. And again, um, no plan on stopping any of that. That's what made us successful in the first place. So that's what's gonna put us in the terminal velocity, as I like to call it, moving forward.
For sure. And like there's nothing about like Arbitrum like there's nothing about Arbitrum, let alone all of crypto that's done yet. So
No, of course not, right? And again, this isn't it's not a zero sum game. It's a multi-chain world. There's going to be use cases for everybody involved and things like that. And so there's no, I'm not a maxi in that case, right? Like I never have been. Likely never will be. And again, this isn't a zero sum game.
yeah. Well, okay, so let's put this on pause, come back to like what Arbitrum is in a moment because I want to continue with your journey. So you are working at SFox, you're realizing that there's all these tokens, then you see this like new frontier of both like technology and maybe financial opportunity open up in front of you. You get in there, you lose a bunch of money to crypto kitties or whatever whatever they called it on
Nyan cat.
Arbitrum. Yeah. And so then what?
Yeah. Again, so working at SFox for several years there, but I've always been like an on-chain type of guy. I've literally never traded cryptocurrency on a centralized exchange. I've only ever used them as on and off ramps to get on-chain. So it was basically just like kind of a natural progression for me in that sense, right? I got on chain specifically. We're talking post 2021 August onto Arbitrum, right? And then that was kind of during right after they launched, probably 2-3 months. That's when the froth was really going on. Like Olympus, of course, you had everybody else having multi-billion-dollar valuations. Basically, it was all vapor, if you will. But in that sense, right, like there was, I'll really play on the Olympus forks, right? They were everywhere. They were on every single chain, right? And the first one on Arbitrum was called 02 Ohm, and which eventually turned into Umami Finance. And I took a real liking to the community there in that certain Discord, and it was just because of the folks that were there, that were talking with, et cetera, that kind of shared the same ethos and values that I kind of have myself. And so I just kind of gravitated toward that Discord, right, and that community and that coin. Bag held it down about 90%, so that was fun. But the community was cool, so I kept going. I mean, and then eventually, right? I mean, to your point before, Rex, like, got myself involved, started speaking out some of my ideas and things of that nature, right? And then, like, I guess the founder at the time took notice to that and kind of just invited me to say, like, hey, man, do you want to run some of our business development initiatives, right? And I couldn't have been more stoked to do so, right? It was on a chain that I thoroughly enjoyed transacting on, with a project that I thoroughly enjoyed working with. And so it was pretty much like a match made in heaven at that point, or in that sense, right? And then what that gave me was basically like not an in, but a purview, if you will, into the broader Arbitrum ecosystem, and had me talking to various different protocols on the network, and seeing the inner workings of them and their mechanics and how how the project works, etc. And from there, it just kind of blossomed into this whole thing, right?
So I think there is like endless things we can say about umami. I think for me the biggest takeaway of umami and it is like umami is like kind of a microcosm of like the Arbitrum story, which is kind of a microcosm of like the crypto story, which is and you kind of alighted over it. So like just to be clear for the audience, like during the 02 Ohm days, like it was a straight up Ohm fork and there was like probably no purpose for it. Like I wasn't around at the time. I don't know. Like I've heard a lot of people say that like some maybe shady stuff was happening on, or maybe like the like I don't even know. Like a lot of the people don't even know who the original core devs are. Like it was madness, right? And then around
As most Olympus forks were. So he
no,
doesn't
yeah,
have to do
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Again, not trying to throw specific shade, but like I showed up in like March of last year, or was that last year? I'm losing sense of time. But anyway, I showed up like right after the transition to Umami Finance,
It was
and
March.
like yeah, and like
Yeah, it was
during
March.
that time, it was like I didn't even know about this. Honest to God, I didn't even know it was an ohm fork when I first started. I didn't know about any of the drama. Like what I saw was this like group of like obviously kids, obviously like not super professional people, but people trying to come together and like build something that like they at least intended to be real. And you know, the umami story specifically is like pretty tragic. And like fun fact for the listeners, I was Nick's replacement after he moved on to off chain, same job. So like I don't know, small world, but the so umami like itself has like some sad stuff and like not even worth talking about on this podcast. If anybody's ever interested, like Flywheel did the perfect article the day it was going down, got quotes from everyone. Like I refer you to that to talk about umami drama, but the reason I bring this up is like to participate in this space is to watch like technology mature from you know like tools to take advantage of each other to like hopefully like legitimate businesses and institutions. And so one, I just like if you have any words or anything you want to say about like kind of that process and like how you experienced it. But two, yeah, I mean, what? Yeah, I guess. Do you have any thoughts or you want to share about just like the transformation you've seen in Umami and in Arbitrum over the last like year that you've been involved?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question as well. I guess I can start with many projects in the past, and we've seen this shift probably over the last say 8 to 12 months, maybe even 6 to 8 months. The shift in the type of how protocols are run in that sense, right? Like they in the past they've tended to give large amount of their native token emissions out as quote unquote yield, right? Making what we like to call Ponzi-nomics in that sense, right? So so your yield could be like, oh my God, I'm getting 500% APR, but yeah, you're getting it in this Ponzi token, quite frankly, right? That if everybody else is getting 500% APR, right, that means the token's likely going to be down only, unless we're talking about signs of froth, right? But typically it will be down only, right? And cool thing about Umami, and specifically, actually, I'll give myself a little pat on the back. Some I said back in February of shit, it might have been 2021 or 2022. I don't even remember.
Yeah, I know,
Everything's just
man.
mushed
It's
together at this point. But
like
it was
I'm
this.
pretty sure next month is going to be May 2020, right?
but we kind of coined this, and others were likely doing it at the same time, right? But like because like cavemen, right? Like no single person found the fire. There was likely people around the world having fire at the same time. But this term like real yield, like what does that mean? That means you're giving out, or not giving out, but providing, if you will, quote unquote real yield in the form of stable coins, blue chip coins such as Ethereum or Bitcoin, whatever it may be, in the form of yield instead of your native token, right? And in the past, you never really saw that, right? Any money that the protocol made, they just kept. They put it into their treasury. They used it for various different purposes, et cetera, et cetera. And people were getting wildly rich off of this, and that's not a secret. And then there was some, again, just some shift that happened, maybe a psychological shift, whatever it may be, in in that time, I guess you could say, where I'm not sure if it was like communities that said this or like retail, whatever it may be, but a lot of protocols started shifting to this real yield movement where they capped the I guess percent of native protocol emissions that you had, and then started redirecting some of the protocol revenue, if you will, back to the token holders, right? And Umami was one of the first to type of do this with their Marinate product, right? They were fortunate enough to have a $5 million treasury from the Olympus bonds at one point, right? So they deployed that in different, various different protocols to collect, some sort of yield, if you will, and then they redirected that yield back to their, their coin stakers in the form of Ethereum, and they still do that to this day. And I think that catalyzed, if you will, and alongside a lot of other folks that were doing it at the same time, but I think that catalyzed, the type of protocols and the type of tokenomics and designs that you see coming out today, and that is treating the token holders the right way, redistributing the revenues to them in the form of, again, stables, blue chip coins, so that you have a sustainable token, you have a sustainable business model, right? A la GMX, right? They have their GLP token where, X percent, and it's a very high percent. I think it's like 70 or something like that. Don't quote me. But percent of the trading fees get routed to the GMX and GLP stakers, right? And that's a viable business model. It runs the exchange. It feels like the users of the exchange also feel like they're getting treated well while using the platform, because they're like, oh, okay, I'm paying these trading fees, but I'm also getting a cut of that on the back end by using the protocol and maybe providing liquidity in the form of GLP. And really, I think that it's birthed like a lot of new movements, like protocols that are up and coming are all very focused on revenue and distributing some sort of value, you could say, to its token holders, and not just pump and dump and give out 5,000 million percent APR native tokens, etc. Right? So yeah, I think that's really what that's what's the really cool shift, I guess you could say, over the last couple of years, and how the DeFi market in itself has matured, and it's matured quite fast, right? Because if you think about DeFi, DeFi summer 2020 was probably the kickstart of a lot of this kind of this stuff, and you look at DeFi as like in the whole crypto space, it's a very, very small subset, and I think it has a lot of potential, and the movement that's happened in the last couple of years is moving towards that maturity and that potential. I do believe that DeFi could be 1,000x from here, in the next 10 years. And these distributed systems, if you will, decentralized marketplaces, peer-to-peer networks, etc. I do think it resonates with a lot of younger folks, and maybe even folks our age as well. And to kind of see the potential of it. But yeah, man, I'll leave it at that.
No, yeah, I mean, I think it's just like so funny when I hear you explaining this stuff. I'm a little bit like, you're explaining like super basic business principles, right? Like,
exactly, literally, exactly.
And it is like kind of funny just like to kind of take a step back and like really think about like how profound it is that we needed to go through the experience of like scamming each other like in a good intention way before we went back to like, oh no, this is just like how business works.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah. And then my other kind of reaction to that is it's really cool. I totally agree to watch the industry evolve and mature into, I just said it in a condescending way, but into just like being real businesses. But also what's happening is like we're watching the technology evolve to like be like, Umami is doing this thing where it's like essentially just like yield farming with its treasury and paying it out. And like that's one innovation into maturity, right? But the other one is like this whole like VE system, what the Curve is implemented, that Convex built on top of, that I don't know.
There's a whole bunch of them now.
DAO is building, yeah, right, and like then that really opens up like entirely new possibilities. That is like the point of this technology. So all to say is like that whole set of innovation probably needs to go through the same maturity as the first one, where like we need to actually provide real value and not be scamming each other. But it's just like really cool to watch, and like it's so cool how fast it happens, and we can just sit here and watch the world change in front of our eyes.
Exactly. Well, I mean, iterations, right? After iterations is what drives innovation in that sense. But the cool thing about crypto is we tend to speed run things versus like the broader markets, which tend to play out over longer periods of time. So I guess in that sense, it's a bit better that you do speed run it, you kind of get it over with, it's out of the system. Now you're moving on to that next iteration.
It's not only that we speed run it, it's that it's sped run out in the open. And maybe those are consequences of each other, but it's just like, I just read a really cool book called World for Sale, and it's about how the commodities industry like happened in like basically from like post World War II on. And it's just like all these crazy stories, and it's like really cool to read as a history, but literally the entire point of the book is that until like the 2000s, even governments didn't realize that like they were being controlled by like 8 different commodities brokers like Jump that were like controlling like who got what at what price, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's a no, that's a very fair point, right? It's almost like I'm trying to say it without being crude. Um,
Whatever,
I'll
be
leave it. I'll leave
crude. Yeah, okay,
it.
all
No, I'll just
right.
leave it.
Yeah, so okay, cool, you're at Umami, and
I can even speak to some of that too, right? Like we were developing these vaults, right? These delta neutral vaults, if you will, right? And
you were around for both of them, right?
of course, yeah, of course. I drove like 8-figure TVL into the or had commitments to 8-figure TVL into the first one before it just didn't work, right? And I do give kudos to the team where they shut it down very quickly, and that was the right thing to do. Um, but in saying that, there was some actual serious interest in those vaults. In that in from both like from a whale perspective, of course, like on chain whales, like oh, if I can get some nice yield on chain, but also from off chain funds and not just crypto funds either. Some prop shops had some interest in it because obviously they don't have to play by regulatory rules or anything like that. They can just it's private money; they can do whatever they want. But there was some serious interest in these types of things, and to say that I think it regressed a little bit after the tumultuous times you could say we've had in the last several months, right? But just to point out, like there was interest, and that type of interest I don't think goes away, right? It maybe just subsides a little bit, and then when things come back, froth comes back, whatever it may be, those interests become interests again, and even more so, there'll be more instances of it, I guess you could say.
So okay, in that like so let me explain to you what the vaults are, right? You as they actually are as a DeFi person. And like cuz my point is like I explaining that to a person who's not already drinking the Kool-Aid on all of this
It's
is
like
like
cuckoo town.
yeah, so like why don't I try to like just tell you what it is for the audience's sake, and then like can you help translate that and like help me understand like how you would talk to someone who like doesn't already own a ledger about like why this is a compelling investment for them?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. So Umami vaults, right? You deposit. We start with GLP, which for the purposes of this is simply like a trading venue that pays out a very large amount of fees, and basically you can deposit 5 assets into GLP: stablecoins, ETH, Bitcoin, Link, and the Uni token.
Uniswap, correct.
Yeah, and like that goes in basically. You deposit 1 asset, you get exposure to all the assets in GMX's predefined percentages, and then like you farm fees based on that. The problem with that is like while the fee farming is very good, maybe you're not like interested in holding exposure to like any of the volatile assets. You just want the
Single
stable.
sided asset. Yeah,
And so what Umami did in 2 different iterations because the technology needed fixing, but at a high level, what they did is create a vault that says, okay, we will give you, you deposit your single asset, and we will go out and deposit that into GLP and then hedge out any of your other exposures. So the net benefit is you get all of the fees from GMX, but without taking any price volatility.
correct. Well, price volatility if you were to do stables, but obviously you could do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, sure,
Yeah,
sure,
yeah.
sure. Okay, like my, that was not English.
Yeah,
How,
I guess for the most part, right? It's as straightforward as it comes is that the any sort of vault product, 4.6, I guess layman's terms, right? Every sort of vault product you can think of as a structured product, in a traditional finance type term, right? Where it's a very intricate type of investment vehicle, whereas you yourself cannot craft out the back end strategy, if you will. However, you can give it to somebody else that can extrapolate that back end strategy and do it for you for a small fee.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, so you're like, okay, fine, fair enough. I understand how like structured product works. I even understand how like administrated investing works. But like, like, what risks am I taking, and what,
Great,
like,
great question.
why, and where is this money even coming from?
So number one, to address the risk question. So DeFi in itself is very inherently risky, right? You're operating on chain. There's no regulations for the most part. There's no I can call my bank up and say, hey, I made a wrong deposit. Can you please revert that transaction, right? Once the transaction is complete, it's complete. There's no quote unquote reverting. I mean, unless you hard fork the chain, but that's out of the question.
Yeah, out of scope.
So the risk really comes in the in two ways, right? One would be on I'm trying to figure out on a human level, I guess you could say, where the creators of whatever vault or contract they're using could put malicious code within that within that contract or vault, so they could just pull your funds, right? And that's like smart contract risk. So that's definitely number one. And in terms of vault contracts, right, that smart contract risk is, or vault products, I should say, that smart contract risk is heightened, if you will, because not only do you have the vault products itself, their smart contracts, like those may be at risk, but would also whatever um, venue that they're depositing your money in to use to collect the yield from, you have that smart contract risk as well, right? Um, so I really think, like, in terms of like security risk, it's really inherently on the smart contract risk. Also, if there's some sort of multi-sig that could rug you very maliciously, etc., right? And then also on your own level, right? What if you drop your ledger in a bottle of water and you just never wrote down your seed phrase? Then you can never recover your funds, right? It's banking yourself is not, it's not only terrifying in a sense, but it's also a little bit hard. Especially setting up a ledger and things, or treasure, whatever you want to use it in that sense. But to answer your second question, Rex, where does the yield come from? I think that falls onto what we were talking about before in this real yield movement, right? Like, you're going to go park your users' funds in a protocol that provides quote unquote real yield, such as GMX, who provides kickbacks with the trading fees, right? They don't collect that all themselves; they redistribute that out to the token holders, the GLP token holders and GMX token holders. Now, there's a lot of protocols, especially on Arbitrum, but also on various different chains, have really adopted this GMX-esque tokenomics, if you will, with this dual token model, where it's the liquidity token and the just a regular native token to the protocol itself, right? And it is a very novel way of doing tokenomics, and there's iterations on it from various different types of folks. But in saying that, right, in the past there wasn't many venues where you can go quote unquote collect real yield, but now as new protocols come and this new iterations start happening, there is a plethora, if you will, of venues that you can go to collect quote unquote real yield. And one of those could be not even a perpetual exchange, but like I'm not gonna. There's a couple on Arbitrum. There's again on other chains. It's like gambling sites where you can go gamble on sports. You could play a flip game, which is literally just press 1 or 2, and then you flip a coin, and right. But they still adopted this like real yield movement where you kick back the protocol fees to the users, right? So there's definitely a different ways where you can or I guess collect that sort of yield. And just one thing on that as well. Native emissions, they're not bad in a sense, right? They're not, right? You could pair native emissions with quote unquote real yield emissions, right, to give you that boosted APR. But where it gets bad is what we talked about before, where you have like 1,000,000% APR, a la Olympus forks giving out just major amounts of tokens with no utility or nothing to really do besides sell them, right? It's or if you wanted to hold them, you're a hardcore community member, whatever it may be. But yeah, but just to say that.
First of all, good job. You should get a job in business development. Um, but I guess like it's it's so hard for me to like stand on the uneducated side of this, and just like wonder at like what level, like at what point do you stop asking questions? You know, like
Never.
no, no, no,
Yeah.
not you, but like as a fund, right? Like
Mm,
if if you Nick say, okay, then we hedge out the price of this using perps. And if you're not familiar with perps, they're just futures contracts with like no settlement date. Like, I wonder if like, oh yeah, duh, you had like hedge, no big deal. Or is it okay? Well, who's doing the hedging? How are they implementing their smart contract? As like, is it a pool based model, or and like, So my brain's broken.
No, I know that. No, it's a really fair point, right? Because when I was talking to a lot of these folks about these vaults, right? You had people that really dug into the nitty gritty, like what you just said, like who's doing the hedging, where are these venues at, right? And then you had folks that would be like, oh, 15% APY, okay, where are you going to do it? Oh, that's it. Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Take my money.
Oh yeah. Only one place. Great. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So it really varies, right? And the type of, I guess, it varies on the type of investor, the type of risk tolerance that they may have, the type of due diligence that they just do, right? It's a wide spectrum, if you will, right? Kind of like the bell
Mhm.
curve.
Yeah. 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 For sure. Okay, so like very cool, like awesome. Thank you for like spending so much time on Umami, but let's like transition you to off chain. And so like my question as someone who's like still on like on the side of the line that's about like building individual projects and products as opposed to where you are, which is like more on the infrastructure side, and like enabling people to build projects and products. Like, what about your position in off chain like made you jump that gap and like get you just excited about like what you're doing now?
Great question, man. So my job here at Offchain, so I work on the partnerships team, right? So it's that client facing, if you will, position. No back office stuff. I do a little bit of back office stuff as everybody does, but where I got specifically hired for this role called success management. Now, you can think of a lot of the other PMs, if you will, are out there headhunting in like a traditional, like maybe account executive role. If your audience would be familiar with that, courting different types of builders, founders, etc., to come and deploy on the network, right? So I do a little bit of that, right? Everybody's a salesman in their company, right? If they're good, etc. But really, I spend most of my time with right on that cusp of deployment or post deployment. And I work with them on a number of different things. So I'm on the line with 5, 6, 7 protocols a day, really providing them with the resources that they need to succeed on the Arbitrum blockchain. And I do that with a number of different ways, right? Like any sort of marketing help that may need, right? I help setting up AMAs, amplification of socials, things of that nature. I act as a liaison between our engineering team in case a protocol has a technical question, right? And they needed an answer, deploying some sort of blockchain, some error, is getting thrown, right? Always help on that front. Any sort of BD help that they want, right? Instead of going in there and creating a Discord ticket or a cold DM on Twitter, right? They can always utilize my team and I on getting themselves like warm intros to the ecosystem, and then also vice versa too, right? So I'm so immersed in into this ecosystem that when I'm talking to various protocols, right, I could say like, hey, I think you could partner with XYZ protocol, right? So that business development relationship kind of goes both ways, right? And then something really cool that I like to harp on too as well is that something I like to call infrastructure relations. It's a stupid term that I literally made up myself. And when I say the word when I say the word infrastructure, I mean it very generally. You could be APIs, RPCs, our oracles, right? In all companies, centralized exchanges, market makers,
Basically,
custodians.
everything that's not within the smart contract.
Anybody that services like an on-chain DApp protocol, right, is what I fall under that infrastructure umbrella. So, and I know I develop relationships with these folks because when a protocol, I'll give a very crude example. When a protocol comes to me and they say like, "Hey Nick, I'm looking for a security audit," I go, "Okay, let's jump on the line." Like I'll never ask to look at code, like that's very proprietary to everybody, right? Of course, but I'll say like, how many lines of code do you have? What's your budget look like on this? What's the time horizon look like on this, right? Sit down with them to really go over like the scope of what they're looking for. And on that way, since I, very familiar with a lot of these security firms, I can make an educated decision, if you will, that, X or Y security firm would really be the best, the best to service this project here, right? And that goes for across the line. Like anybody, again, centralized exchanges because they all offer various different things. Oracles, maybe you want a centralized Oracle, maybe you want a chain link, whatever it may be, right? Just so we could again service or I guess provide our protocols with the resources that they really need to succeed. And That's basically what I do around here, right? It's and I'll say it's the best. I wake up every day with a smile on my face. It's I thoroughly enjoy the work that I do, which I think is something very important, if you will. I've been in positions where I've just there to collect a paycheck and go bide the time, I guess you could say, until you find something that you really like. And to my point before, like I went into college not knowing what I wanted to do. Came out of college not knowing what I was wanted to do. Like I sold windows, telecom, the whole nine yards. Like just being just the typical shitty salesman, if you will. But no, I feel like I found the industry that I want to work in, and definitely I don't see myself moving out of this whole crypto space, DeFi, whatever you want to call it, like anytime soon. I want to help the industry grow as a whole, and I want to be an influential part of that. And I'm very excited to do it.
I think that all of us who have like really dedicated our careers and like really like realistically the ones that stick around for at least one bear cycle, but like probably a lot of people get shaken out of their second bear cycle as well. I mean, this is my first one, just to be clear. But anyway, I just like you have to. I do think it's a very common experience that like I never was excited about work before.
Never. Same. Likewise.
I wasn't really excited about the future. It just kind of felt like the world like was falling apart around me, and like we're managing a decline, and like like
It's the existential dread, if you will, right?
yeah, and it's just like best case scenario where like I guess like managing climate change in a world that is like just getting more and more like crowded and polluted and unequal. And I don't really think that crypto addresses any of the things that I just pointed out necessarily, actually at all. But I do think that like what crypto provides is this like vibrant space where you're like seeing the future change in front of you, and like walk and seeing the world as it could be, and then like just feeling like so driven to contribute to that.
That's a very fair point. And just to build on that too, right? We live in the United States of America, and a lot of our leaders, if you will, legislative leaders, only think about cryptocurrency from the lens of the United States of America. It's like only in America, it's nowhere else. But again, that could be further from the truth. It is a worldwide industry, and many people benefit from it, right? Like you can get an airdrop that if you're living in a third world country, it'll change your life, right? It's that's the type of cool shit, if you will, that I that kind of keeps me driving, right? It is this worldwide cohort that everybody's kind of working towards the same, right? I hop on a call with somebody from France. I hop on a call with somebody from Hong Kong. Everybody's very happy to be there to chat, kind of all talk the same, have the same type of ideas, things of that nature. So it's they call Ethereum the world's computer, right? And it really is, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, I think that you, in order to dedicate your life to this space, you need to have been betrayed by like the traditional system in some way, and like in some way that was pretty violent, and like showed you that like what you were told is not how it works.
That that was the 2008 financial crisis for me.
Yeah, yeah, and I graduated in high school in 2009. So like honest to me, like that for me it might as well not have happened. Like fortunately, like I come from a family that like was able to weather it without like making it known to me, and then like I just went to college for the hard years, like but I have a few things that did, but like the one that's just like so clear to me is so my fiance is Russian, like born in Russia, moved here when she was 15, not speaking English, and like her whole family still lives in Moscow, like and I've been experiencing like financial sanctions for the first time, you know, but I think to be in this space is to be like betrayed and like definitely international pilled in a way that's like not typical in this country. And it's just so funny to hear you because I totally agree with you. I was talking to someone on this podcast a few episodes ago, and I made a comment that they got interested in crypto because their brother went and studied abroad, and he found Nano to make crypto transfers to him. And my comment was, that's so cool that you figured like you actually got into crypto for a real use and not just for like rampant speculation. And his comment was like, Yeah, but like I think that's like a pretty American perspective because like it's only in America that this doesn't have real use, where everywhere else it's like kind of needed. And so like also on this podcast, the episode that came out today, which will be last week for when this comes out, but was with Reserve Protocol, which are like doing stuff on chain, which is cool. But like what's way cooler is they have like I think hundreds of thousands of people in Latin America like using their app to store their wealth in like Argentina and Colombia in reserve like RSV. It's like a stable coin that is farming curve dollars. Like that is
That's
crazy.
that's cool, man. That's cool shit.
Yeah, I know. And so I just think it's so American to just feel like we have we have any say in this.
I know, right? And to my point before, like there's not an American industry. There's like actual people use it for actual shit. Like in like I mentioned Tron before as one of my first first at my first job in the crypto industry. But there's Tron, the Tron network is cheap to transact on, and I know a lot of folks in other countries use it to just send money to across the whether it to be or even to just like do regular commerce in their town versus like a extremely inflated I guess native currency, if you will. And so yeah, I guess you're in that sense you're right. Like we're a little pampered here in the case of actual like real use case because we have built out infrastructure and the dollar and things of that nature. But there are people around the world that are actually using this stuff for like real serious things.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just I think like I really believe that we have passed the Rubicon, and I don't know if it was when at the merge or even before that, but like Ethereum is now inevitable. And like the decision that the United States makes is like to our like benefit or our detriment, but like the reality is like Ethereum is inevitable. And like look man, like I hold it for utility reasons. Like I in two the during the January 6th when I was on the phone with Wells Fargo wealth advisors, happened to be on the phone with them to talk to about moving my like money over, and the capital's under attack. And so what the thought that goes in my head is like, I need to know that if I move over to you, that within 4 years I can have at least 10% of my net worth in another country. I don't know if I need to buy an apartment in France. I don't know, like whatever, but like like I need to know that if I need to leave here, it's going to be okay. As someone of Jewish heritage, like it's scary here.
Yeah, no, it's a weird
Um,
time here, man. It really
yeah.
is.
And so like crypto is a real answer for that. Like I don't worry about that anymore. Like if I need to go to Mexico tomorrow, like I I don't need anything.
And I say that too, right? Like uh, I don't have a fiance or a wife, but I have a very long time girlfriend who
Mhm.
eventually that's my plan.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been going out for like 10 years now, so it's quite a while.
Yeah. Is
But
she
yeah,
there
I
in the
mean,
background?
no, she's not. She's at work.
Like,
But but no, I have the same thought. Like if what if they make it like if it's illegal to work in crypto in the states, like I have no choice but
yeah.
then to
Are
leave, right?
you
Like
Dubai or Singapore? That's my question. That's my only question.
Singapore.
Yeah, both.
Honestly, El Salvador is not a bad one either. Or there's a couple different places that you can get like permanent residency, but you always got to pay the tax man, no matter what. The only country that does. It's the most ridiculous, ludicrous thing of all time.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Pick one and then buy your yacht anyway.
I was gonna say, yeah,
All right, man.
that doesn't
Like
matter.
before we wrap up, as we discussed, like I really didn't want this to be a like podcast about like the projects. I wanted this to be about like you and your story and just about like the people that are here. But with the last couple of minutes, I definitely want to just like give you a platform to like shill whatever you want to shill about Arbitrum and like to like anyone that wants to build on it and just like say anything that you want to say because man, I know that you're passionate about it and I know that it's like genuine for you. So
I appreciate that. I'm not gonna shill anything. What I'm gonna say is that if you want it and if you want to work in the crypto industry, man, there's plenty of different avenues that you can go do so in. Whether it's like you Rex starting a podcast or being a BD at a small protocol and working your way up. This is an industry with very low barrier to entry, if you will, versus being a financial advisor at Wells Fargo, right? And no, truly though, and it's I'm not going to say it's easy because it's not. You're gonna have to work hard for sure. However, if you want it, The taking is there for, or I guess the whatever that term is, I forgot, but it's there for the taking, if you will. And so please, if it is your passion, do pursue it. I've never regretted it once in my life. I don't think I will. I've been rugged a million times, and I still don't regret it. I take it as it is. But again, it's the barrier to entry is low, and if you want it, there's various different ways that you can go get it. And I'll leave it at that.
Awesome, man. No, great message. And yeah, I mean, I think like it's about wanting it, and it's about like believing in what we're doing. And like the people that like get rugged and like hate it and walk away are the ones that are here for the wrong reasons. So
Exactly so.
yeah, cool, man. Thank you so much. So where can we find you? Socials?
Socials at island_Westlake, and that's literally it.
Island Westlake. All right, man.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. And yeah, just man, thanks for joining the pod.
Cheers, Rex. I appreciate it, man.